What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, it's Monday, so you know what time it is. We are going through all of those hot waiver ads heading into week 8. This is the point of the season where it's crunch time. We really need to understand our record, what it's going to take to make it into the playoffs, maybe secure that bye week, our moves and actions now, whether it be through trade or waiver ads. Those moves, they have to be calculated because this is the point in the season where those small moves have major impacts in the playoffs. Before we do get into the video though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson have the longest pass in completed air distance. Which quarterback currently has the pass ranking 3rd? The correct answer was actually Justin Herbert. Congratulations, it's a Harrison thing. You got this one right. As for today's stat of the day, which running back currently ranks a dead last in both rushing yards over expectation as well as rushing yards over expectation per attempt? This stat does highlight poor production though, so we're looking for an underperformer here. If you know who that player is, leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. We're going to start with running backs as usual, but I feel this is a good time to just highlight the running backs that really should be owned. Leading this list, of course, is Chase Edmonds. He is owned in about 56% of leagues. For those of you who may have been unaware, Kenyon Drake, he was knocked out of the game. The injury did appear somewhat serious. He needed help off the field. Ultimately was carted into the locker room, so it's very likely that Chase Edmonds is the workhorse running back coming off the bye week. Behind him, we have Giovani Bernard. Bernard is owned in about 48% of leagues, and as it stands, Joe Mixon is currently week to week. They have a bye in week 9. It would make a lot of sense for the Cincinnati Bengals to hold Mixon out this week, which means at a minimum, you have one more game of Giovani being the guy. The Philadelphia Eagles also have a week 9 bye, so it wouldn't surprise me either if they held Miles Sanders out until after that week as well, which means Boston Scott, he definitely can be started. Eagles face Dallas. Dallas, since losing Dak, have been getting themselves into major deficits, so if the Philadelphia Eagles can get a lead, potentially lean on the run game late in this game, Boston Scott, he definitely has some upside this week. We also have Jamaal Williams of the Green Bay Packers. It's unclear at this time how severe that calf strain is, but what we know is that while Aaron Jones is out, Jamaal Williams has a legit RB1 upside. The last likely owned running back is J.K. Dobbins. It's possible somebody may have dropped him last week or could drop him this week because he's coming off of the bye. His volume was pretty low considering Mark Ingram was out, so some owners out there, they possibly could lose faith. So if you do see him falling to the waivers, make sure you grab him as fast as possible. We're moving over to the running back ads this week, and to lead this list, we have JaMycal Hasty. As we know, the 49ers backfield, it's riddled with injuries. We have Tevin Coleman, who's been out for most of this entire season, currently on IR. Raheem Mostert on IR himself as well. And now Jeff Wilson Jr., who was having a phenomenal game before being knocked out with an ankle injury. It is suspected to be a high ankle sprain as well, so it's looking like JaMycal Hasty will be possibly the leading rusher out of this backfield. There is of course Jerick McKinnon, but from what we've seen, the 49ers, they've been opting to give the ball to other options like Jeff Wilson, now JaMycal Hasty, so to me, I don't think he's any threat to take over as the lead back. Behind him, we have Carlos Hyde currently coming in at 8% ownership. As we all know, Chris Carson unfortunately went down with an injury. How long he will actually be out though, that's up in the air. Whatever time frame we're given though, I would probably lean on the shorter end of it. We know Chris Carson's an absolute animal. We had thought the last time he was battling injuries, that would hold him out for much longer, but he in fact played in the very next game. However long Carson is out though, Carlos Hyde's definitely going to be the guy. From a talent perspective, it's a pretty significant drop off, but this is a team that has plenty of scoring opportunities available. Just keep in mind Perine. This week, they're playing San Francisco. San Francisco on the season has been one of the better run defenses, so a player like Hyde, while he could excel in a positive matchup, just be sure, temper your expectations this week. Behind him, we have Tevin Coleman. He's currently owned in 20% of leagues. This is, of course, an upside pick in the chance that he's activated off IR. I do believe if he is back and healthy, he would lead this backfield in rushes on the ground, red zone rush attempts, but as it stands today, we really don't know when he'll be coming back, so using your waiver on him is more of a stash play than a guarantee. The next rusher we have is LaMical Perine of the New York Jets. We finally had a game in which he out-touched Frank Gore. Without him being a true workhorse though, he's not a very valuable starter. The Jets, they're easily one of the worst teams in the league right now. We can't expect them to be within one score of any opponent, so if he's only getting 13 touches per game, limited red zone opportunities, he's going to need the volume to make up for that. So overall, an ad for Perine, it's not really an ad for upside, more of a player to spot start with a bye week issue, but any player receiving 13 touches, consistent work in the passing game, they really should be owned at this point. In LaMical Perine, he's only owned in 11% of leagues. Behind him, we have Gallman. He was taking over, of course, for the injured Devonta Freeman. What we do know is that in this offense, there really isn't all that much value when it comes to the running back position, just because they're playing from behind so frequently. Regardless though, the New York Giants, they've been pretty good about getting volume to their leading rusher. Devonta Freeman, he had starter value while he was the guy, but now that he was knocked out with injury, it looks like the next man up is Gallman. If you do add him though, just keep in mind his schedule gets a bit rough for running backs. Next week, they face Tampa Bay. The week after that, they face Washington. So if Devonta Freeman is still out during those next 2 weeks in those tough matchups, feeling confident about putting Gallman in, that's really not a luxury you're going to get. The final running back we have is Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens. He's currently owned in about 2% of leagues. Not many people, understandably, wanted to pick him up when he'd be on a bye week. He's also an early down rusher. Those players, inherently, they have very low floors. Just be aware though, an early down rusher, a goal line back, can be very valuable in an offense like the Baltimore Ravens have. So if Edwards is getting 10 plus rush attempts on this Lamar Jackson led offense, his chances of scoring, they're going to be pretty good. Always a risky start, of course, but he's definitely, in the meantime, somebody that should be owned in all leagues. Let's move over to the wide receivers though, and to lead this list, we have Shepard of the New York Giants. As we all know, Darius Slayton has been the go-to receiver for Daniel Jones for virtually the entire season. Shepard, 1 week into coming off of IR, his very first game, he flipped that notion on its head. Shepard led all receivers on this team in targets. Slayton saw half of the targets, coming in with 4. Golden Tate, half of Slayton's volume, coming in with just 2 total targets. The New York Giants are a team that will be playing from behind for the majority of their matchups, which bodes very well for a passing game script. So if Shepard is going to ultimately be the favorite receiver on this team from a volume perspective, that provides a safe floor. It can be very valuable. And with Slayton still slated to be the primary outside receiver, the targets that Shepard is projected to receive, they're mostly going to come from high completion throws. We could potentially see a Jamison Crowder type situation down the road if maybe any one of these receivers get injured, but even with everyone healthy, if Shepard is the favorite target of Daniel Jones, which there is of course the possibility of, Shepard's a player who could have immediate starter level value. Moving on, we have Brandon Aiyuk of the San Francisco 49ers. He's currently owned in 20% of leagues. The expected volume for him, it's going to increase. Deebo Samuel knocked out with injury, unfortunately again. It also couldn't have really came at a worse time for Samuel considering they face the Seahawks this week, which means Brandon Aiyuk, his volume, it's going to increase. The matchup, it's extremely juicy. So Aiyuk, he's definitely a player that you could pick up for this week, immediately put into your flex, and the results that you're going to get, you're probably not going to be disappointed with. As for his season-long value though, I think he's really going to be more more hit or miss. Obviously, the volume, it's going to go to George Kittle first. Debo, when he returns, he's going to garner a high target market share as well. In the overall role that Aiyuk plays for this offense, it's more of a gadget guy, and those types of players, they have wide ranges of outcomes. The next receiver we have is Corey Davis of the Tennessee Titans. Davis against Pittsburgh actually received a massive 10 targets, his season high. So as much as we want to discredit him for burning us in the past or use AJ Brown and his success and his return as a reason not to roster Corey Davis, I think at this point he's done enough to earn our respects, somebody who should at the very least be a depth piece, but by no means should be owned in just 22% of leagues. So far this year, he's been very productive. Remember, he's only played in just 4 games. This was his first game back since being activated off the COVID list, but in his 4 total games, he's either scored a touchdown or had 5+ receptions in any given contest. His 8 targets in week 1 actually matched that of AJ Brown's. His 10 targets in week 7, that was also 2 more targets than AJ Brown received. Brown, of course, he's on another level when it comes to yards after catch, so 8 targets for Brown, you're likely getting more production. But if that volume is something we can continue to expect, Corey Davis probably has a safer floor than we give him credit for. Behind him, we have Rashard Higgins, who is the likely heir to the targets going to Odell. Rashard Higgins, if you're an Odell owner or Jarvis Landry owner, you are probably cursing his name over the past few weeks because he's been vulturing touchdowns. Well, now, with Odell Beckham slated to miss a significant amount of time, possibly the entire season, Rashard Higgins is likely going to get consistent volume. From what we've seen from him, he's looked good any opportunity given, and that was on full display against Cincinnati last week, where he caught 6 of 6 targets, 110 yards. No, he didn't score, but he's shown his red zone ability, catching a touchdown in both week 5 and week 6. The next player we have is Cole Beasley of the Buffalo Bills. This is definitely a player who's higher percent owned, not typically the type of player I'm shooting for on the waivers, but we gotta give him some respect. He's coming off of his best performance of the year, 12 targets, 11 receptions, 112 receiving yards, and whenever a player performs that well, yes, you're going to get my attention. While typically I'm stashing players off the waivers that have potential top 20 upside at the position, ones that I'm not contemplating starting over my studs who may be in a bad matchup, but considering there are just so many injuries to top wide receivers, running backs, potential guys you are starting in your flex, I definitely see a role for Cole Beasley being someone you could grab off the waivers and feel comfortable knowing the production you're going to get. The final wide receiver we have is probably going to sound gross. Yes, it's Nelson Agholor of the Las Vegas Raiders. He's currently coming in at just 2% ownership, but quietly, he's been producing. Agholor has now had a receiving touchdown in 4 of 6 games this season. His overall volume, it appears to be trending upward. He saw a season high 9 targets against Tampa Bay. Yes, he did only catch 5 of them, but those 5 receptions, they went for over 100 yards. And anybody posting that amount of production who has now scored in 3 straight games, if your bench is just filled with players that you don't see any upside in, you just need to add players that have the potential to produce, well, Nelson Agholor, quietly, he's been remarkably consistent. And finally, we're now moving over to the tight ends. Unfortunately, there really aren't a ton to go over. A lot of the speculative ads that we have been suggesting, they're now starting to be owned in over 50% of leagues. I do, however, have to shout out Dallas Goedert, who is easily the best ad right now. Rumor has it he should be potentially returning after their bye in week 9, which means week 10, you could have a bona fide TE1 on your hands. We've already seen how much Carson Wentz has proven to love the tight end position, even targeting Richard Rodgers, an unknown commodity, a whopping 8 times against one of the better defenses at defending opposing tight ends, that in the New York Giants. An ad for Goedert here is definitely an ad for somebody with playoff or championship expectations. If you're weak at tight end at all, Dallas Goedert in weeks 14 through 16, he faces New Orleans, Arizona, followed by Dallas in the championship. Right now, he's only owned in 29% of leagues, so there's a chance out there that you could grab him, I wouldn't wait much longer, because if more people find out he's coming back in a couple weeks, the odds of you even being able to land him, they're going to be slim to none. Behind him, Logan Thomas. This is a player I had last week. I definitely believe that what we're seeing from a production standpoint, a consistency standpoint, this is more or less what we can expect for the remainder of the season. Yes, he's been a bit lucky when it comes to TD variance, but I only see his role expanding. He's been consistent for this offense the entire year. Remember, this is the same player receiving 9, 8, and 7 targets through the first 3 weeks. Just keep in mind, he's on a bye this week. You're unlikely going to need to spend a waiver claim on him, but undoubtedly, he's a player who's trending up. Behind him, Rodgers from Philadelphia. We did mention him briefly when talking about Goedert. This, of course, is more of a short-term rental, but one that can produce very well for you heading into this week's matchup against Dallas. If you need a streamer, or maybe want to add Goedert and Rodgers and play Rodgers until Goedert returns, that's a safe strategy as well, because it seems almost whoever is playing tight end outside of Zach Ertz is going to succeed in this offense. The final tight end we have is Harrison Bryant, coming off of a phenomenal performance taking over for the injured Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper, of course, we weren't expecting to be without this week, but from what we know today, he may be out until after the bye week. The only reason Bryant doesn't rank higher is because there's always the possibility of David Njoku getting an increased role, Bryant maybe being a 1-week wonder, similarly to what we saw with Drew Sample a while back, but there's no doubt he should be owned. But guys, that's gonna do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.